crime guns in Boston originate because of purchases made here in Massachusetts. We think it's especially important that this study, or that this bill include a provision around limiting bulk sales. This is a trafficking provision that we hope to include. But again, I want to underscore that we are very happy with this bill. We're very pleased with the work of our public officials who are here today to speak to this, and we celebrate this work. It's now my privilege and honor to introduce a number of our public officials who are here with us today, and then I'll come back a little bit later to talk more about the rest of the day, in particular the public hearing that will be starting in the Gardner Auditorium at 12 o'clock today. We already have people down there sitting in seats, saving seats, and we are looking forward to a good long day of carrying this message forward. Again, 4 out of 5, good work, Coalition. I'd now like to introduce Chairman David Linsky, who has been a long-time proponent of gun violence prevention and gun violence prevention legislation. He has been a key ally of the Coalition, and we celebrate his work to bring us to this day. Thank you, Representative Linsky.
Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be here today. It seems like it's been a long time coming. When we first gathered to prepare legislation for this session, it was in December 2012. But we didn't rush to judgment. We worked very closely with the Speaker's task force on reducing gun violence and made sure that we didn't act in haste, and the result of that, quite frankly, is a tremendous, tremendous bill. It's not about having the toughest gun laws in the nation. It's about having the most effective gun laws in the nation. And the goal of this legislation is simple. It's to save lives. It's to reduce the number of deaths and injuries from all of the different types of gun violence. It's to reduce the number of murders. It is to reduce the number of suicides. It is to reduce the number of accidental shootings and accidental deaths. The beauty of this bill is it doesn't propose one solution, nor propose 2 solutions, or 3 or 4 or 5 solutions. The beauty of this bill is it takes a comprehensive approach to reducing gun violence, and it recognizes that the many different types of gun violence each require a different solution. This is a tremendous bill. I thank Speaker DeLeo immensely for putting this legislation forward. I thank the Speaker's task force, chaired by Dean McDevitt, for putting this legislation forward and giving us the background and the research and the wherewithal to be able to show my colleagues here in the House and then in the Senate and then the Governor that this bill will make Massachusetts the leader in having the most effective gun violence prevention laws in the country. It is worth it. It is worth it. We need to keep up the fight on this. I want to take a minute and introduce some of my colleagues who are here today, people who have also been there in this fight to reduce gun violence. Representative Frank Smisek from Brookline, Representative Marjorie Decker from Cambridge, Representative Dan Cullinane from Dorchester, Representative Alice Peisch from Wellesley, Representative Dan Ryan from Charlestown, I see here, and floor leader, a member of the Speaker's leadership team, Representative Ellen Story from Amherst. In a couple of hours, or actually less than a couple of hours, the Joint Committee on Public Safety will begin a hearing on Speaker DeLeo's bill. And the message has to be clear from all of us that we believe in this bill because it will reduce gun violence and it will reduce gun deaths and tragedies of all types. Please bring the bill to the floor bring the bill to the floor soon and get this bill passed in the House, and urge the Senate to take it up, and let's get this bill to the governor's desk before July 31st. Thank you very much.
We've also been joined by Representative Kay Kahn from Newton, and I see one of our next speakers, Senator Sonia Chang Diaz, who has also joined us. But before we hear from Senator Chang Diaz, we will hear from Secretary of Public Safety and Security, Andrea Cabral. Thank you so much for being with us today and for representing the governor here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
As many of you know, maybe not all of you, but many of you know, Governor Patrick has been filing comprehensive gun violence legislation for the past 3 legislative sessions. So when we talk about how the time is right for common sense gun safety legislation, the governor is well aware. I was particularly pleased to see that the Speaker's bill includes the governor's mental health background check component and the strengthening of our ability to track private firearm sales through a private dealer. I am particularly grateful for the coalition's advocacy to continue the dialogue on including the 1 gun a month provision in any gun reform bill that the Joint Committee on Public Safety reports favorably. As you know, 1 gun a month prevents straw purchasers. If you prevent someone or any group of someones in Massachusetts from stockpiling weapons and or trafficking in stockpiling weapons, you have prevented a tragedy. I want to thank the Speaker for his leadership on this important issue. This is a strong bill, and I am encouraged by the strong stance taken by the legislature to prevent gun violence. I'm looking forward to testifying at the committee hearing this afternoon in the Gardner Auditorium to speak about the importance of this strong bill and to talk about how we can make it better. Massachusetts should lead in this. We can stop a terrible tragedy from happening in the Commonwealth if we support strong, common sense gun safety legislation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary Cabral. We now are going to be hearing from one of our coalition members, Tanya Ortiz, who is a member of the Be Peace for George campaign of the Episcopal Diocese. Tanya.
Hello, everybody. My name is Tanya Ortiz. I'm 19 years old. I am a youth organizer with the Be Peace for George campaign, which started in memory of my friend George Fuentes, who was shot and killed outside of his home in September of 2012. I am here today as representative for the young people in my community. And first off, I want to thank the coalition for all the hard work that they've been doing and for allowing me the opportunity to share my story with you guys. A few months ago, I joined the coalition to meet with Speaker DeLeo to talk about what laws we thought should be changed. And in that meeting, I shared with him why I cared and why it was important that these laws be changed. I've witnessed shootings, and I remember having to run from parks with my little cousins because it was happening right there in our own neighborhoods. And me and my friends are still hurting from the loss of our friend George. I can tell you from my experience, and a lot of my peers can tell you too, the innocent lives are lost for no reason. And it's not about just the mass shootings that are happening, but it's about the innocent people that die too often due to illegal guns that are on our streets. These are all stories that are not highlighted in the media, and they need to be because they leave as much devastation as a mass shooting does. Now, Speaker DeLeo made good on his promise, and he gave us most of what we asked for. But now what we need, and what really needs to happen, is for the rest of the representatives to back him on this so that our state can change for the better. I met last week with Byron Rushing and a few other young people to talk about how can young people be effective in the legislative process? What can we do? And you know what he told me? He said, youth are the now, the present, and we are going to shape the future. And in order for this to happen, we need to guarantee that we have a future there. We need to not worry about waking up in the morning and wondering if we're going to lose another friend to senseless gun violence. We need this, and we need this help to move forward as a crucial step towards this goal. Thank you.
We also welcome with us today Myrna Ramos, George Fuentes' mother. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you, Tanya. It's now time to introduce Senator Sonia Chang Diaz of the Public Safety Committee. She has been also a true ally of ours, and we welcome her to join us here.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. That's how I can tell there's some people from my district here. You guys say good morning back when we say good morning. It is wonderful to be here. It's bittersweet to be here, of course, because I think we all wish that there were no need for legislation like this in our society, but we know there is. And it's good to see so many faces. I remember very clearly at the very beginning of this legislative session, around bill filing time, I went to a convening in the members' lounge just a few feet from here, and it was a meeting just to gauge interest of members in the legislature in doing a bill like this bill that we're talking about today. And in my 5.5 years in the legislature, I've never seen a room that full in this building for a meeting like that. It was standing room only. And I've been biting my nails since then to see, are we going to follow through on that expression of intent and of willingness and political will to do a good gun safety bill this session. And so I'm really so encouraged and thankful to the Speaker and all those who've worked on this bill for getting us so close to follow through. We're not all the way there yet. We got to get it through the House and the Senate and to the governor's desk. But we're so much closer than we were at the beginning of the session, and so I'm thrilled to be here today. I want to take just a minute to speak about the need for this bill. Even though we here know it, you know, we're preaching to the choir here, but there are a lot of people in this building that we still need to convince, and people outside of this building. I represent the 2nd Suffolk District, which includes some of the neighborhoods that folks are familiar with from hearing about the stories of gun. My district contains from the South End through Mission Hill, Jamaica Plain, Roxbury, Dorchester, down Blue Hill Ave to a little bit of Mattapan and Hyde Park. I want to say unequivocally it is a beautiful, wonderful place to live. I'm joyful to be there as a parent, to take my daughter to the playground in the neighborhoods that I represent. So it's a wonderful community to be in, but it is also the communities that are most impacted by gun violence in our city and in our state. And I have burned in my memory one of my earliest experiences as representing this district. Early in my tenure, I went to the funeral of a 14-year-old boy, Jaywan Martin, and I've been to too many funerals for 14, 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds in my district than I care to recount. But this one in particular, because it was one of my first ones, I remember so clearly. And you think it's going to be the moment when you speak to the parent, the mother who's lost her child, that is going to be the most impossible moment and the most terribly memorable moment for you as a legislator. How can you possibly think what to say to a parent who's lost their child in that way? And Jaywan, you may remember, was killed on the day before Mother's Day. He was an honor roll student at the Timothy Middle School. He was doing everything right and was still lost to gun violence in our city. But the most horrible part of that experience, and the thing that I carry with me in my memory, was not actually that moment when I had to greet his mother and offer my condolences to her and my commitment to keep working on this issue. The most terrible moment was when I passed by the open casket. I looked at young Jaywan there in his casket, and I returned to my seat. And as I returned to my seat, I remember, and I'll always remember this, seeing the faces of the other young boys, his classmates, his friends, his colleagues in the neighborhood who were at that funeral as they walked by the open casket and as they returned to their seats. And watching the look of fear and despair on their faces and thinking to myself as a policymaker, as a legislator, as an organizer, as a citizen, how much we are failing these young men, how fearful that they are, that they could, like their friend Jaywan, do everything right and still maybe not live to see 18. And the weight that they carry around in their lives, and the weight that their parents have to carry around in their lives with that fear, even if they themselves are never direct victims of violence. That is a victimization of young people in our community. And that's why I'm here, thankful for this bill and feeling a sense of urgency around this bill. This bill is not the only thing that we need to do to cure violence in our cities. It is a piece of the puzzle. We also need to do a lot on the prevention end, but it's an important piece of the puzzle, because if we can, at a minimum, take the gun out of the equation and make it so that 13-year-olds and 14-year-olds, 15 and to 20-year-olds are not getting their hands on guns when they shouldn't, then that changes the whole equation, even if there's an act of violence, even if there's a fight on the basketball court or the schoolyard. So that's why I'm here in support of this bill, and I'm thanking Speaker DeLeo for making this a priority, and why, as a member of the Senate and a member of the Public Safety Committee, I'm going to be pushing for the Senate to do the same, so that we can get this bill to the governor's desk, a good bill to the governor's desk, before the end of this legislative session. Lastly, I just want to say that I'm especially encouraged to see provisions in this bill that deal with the issue of the supply chain, because that is the aspect of gun safety that most is going to impact urban districts like mine, where the supply chain is obviously a problem if we are seeing guns get into the hands of 14-year-olds. There's a lot we need to do on the mental health and prevention side, but the supply chain is really a critical piece, and so the aspects that deal with control of secondary sales and making sure that we are doing background checks and registering those secondary sales with the state are critically important. And I would also like to see the bill even further strengthened in this area by adding a provision to do with bulk purchasing, because we know that's one of the sources. So on that note, we know that our work here is not finished. Thank you for all you've done to carry this bill thus far, and let's get it across the finish line. Thank you so much for your work and having me here today.
We want to thank Senator Chang Diaz for modeling the kind of leadership that we are hoping to see in the Senate and as this bill makes its way through the State House. Many of us were activated and angered and outraged. All of us were angered and outraged after the Newtown tragedy happened. That's in part what coalesced the Mass Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence, but so many of us were already outraged at the amount of urban violence that had been happening for years and even decades. With us now is someone who has been a leader in anti-violence initiatives and activities here in Boston. He began as an ER doctor, then became a fabulous community leader and minister, chair of the Boston Foundation, and is now pastor of the Bethel AME Church in Jamaica Plain. He was a leader in the 10-Point Coalition and the Boston Miracle, and we have to thank Ray Hammond for doing so much good work to bring us to this point. So, Reverend Ray Hammond, we're very happy that you're here with us today.
I did something today that's actually a little bit unusual for preachers. I actually cut my speech so that we could do one other thing, and that is if there's somebody here you don't know, one or two people, those of you who know me, I do this all the time, but I think it's really important. One or two people you don't know here, would you just introduce yourself and say, I am so glad we're here together? Marjorie, that's right.
Kevin Foster.
That's right. Absolutely. Thank you so much. All right. That's great. Can I get your attention just for a moment? Would you turn to your neighbor now and tell them, we can do this?
We can do this.
I want you to take a moment to just think about what is happening here and why it is that we are gathered here. It was November 6, 2013. It was a Wednesday, just 3 days short of 7 months ago, that we were gathered in this State House, in this very same spot. We were declaring that we needed new courage for old problems, and that is the problem of gun violence and gun safety. We were not just asking for courage from our political leaders. We were doing some new and some courageous things ourselves. We are the Massachusetts Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence. And in our commitment to ending the epidemic of gun violence, we had worked on tearing down the walls between communities that rarely work together. We were urban-based organizations. We were suburban-based organizations, in some cases even rural groups that had known for too long and too well the toll of gun violence in our Commonwealth. And so, after being horrified into action, we decided that it was time to come together and do something about it. We're mental health organizations and public health groups. We are faith communities, Jewish, Christian, and Muslim, including the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization and Jewish Community Relations Council, and the entire Episcopal Diocese of Massachusetts. We've met with each other, we've listened to each other's stories, and we've determined that together we can do this. Somebody say it. We can do this. We are not airy-headed Pollyannas with our heads stuck in the clouds. We know that legislation alone will not solve the deep-seated and widespread problem of gun violence. And that's why so many of us are working every day on the streets, in the courts, with our schools, through our houses of worship, with our mental health colleagues, by our teaching, and by our preaching, and by our counseling, and by our treating, and by our educating, and by our mediating, and by our advocating to make violence, and especially gun violence, the rare exception and not the all-too-common rule that it is now. We refuse to believe that if you live in America, you have to be as much as 20 times more likely to be killed by a gun than if you live in other developed countries on the planet. We refuse to believe that. We refuse. Amen. And we don't forget the grandmothers. Amen. We refuse to believe that we can't find a way to make our schools, our movie theaters, or our houses of worship safer. And we think we can do this without arming principals, teachers, pastors, or ordinary citizens. We refuse to believe that the power of the National Rifle Association and the gun manufacturers is so great that nothing can be done about the problem of gun safety and gun violence. Amen. And that's why, to all the naysayers, or as one former vice president so memorably put it, the nattering nabobs of negativity, we say this: we can do this! We can do this! With the help of our Massachusetts Senate leadership and membership in Governor Patrick, we can bring Massachusetts into compliance with the federal background check system. We can require a background check every time, not sometimes, not 50% of the time, but every time a gun is sold. We can get the data that we need so that we know what's going on with homicides and suicides. We can extend the discretion of police chiefs when it comes to issuing these licenses and cards. And like Senator Chang Diaz, I'm still believing we can find a way to do something about the buying of handguns in bulk without infringing on the rights of legitimate gun owners and gun dealers, and without locking up a whole lot of women who are being coerced into buying guns. We can do this. We can model the kind of broad-based partnership and leadership that not only has to happen here in Massachusetts, it's got to happen in Washington, D.C. We can show that every life matters. We can stop the waste of lives and resources. We can bring together all the institutions that are needed to really change this. And I'm so proud of the fact that while politicians around the country were looking for cover, our political leaders, Speaker DeLeo and those that you've heard here speak today, were looking for answers. Our political leaders were listening to the voices of all the people, not just the loudest voices, not just the most strident voices, but all the voices. Our political leaders were looking at the data. Our political leaders were convening experts who could tell us the next steps in addressing the problem and not avoiding the problem. And while in other communities people are pointing the fingers at one another, we are joining hands together because we want neighborhoods where elders can sit safely on their porches, children can play safely in their playgrounds, parents can send their children to elementary and middle and high school with a confident expectation of their safe return. Those struggling with mental health issues get access to treatment and not to weapons they can stockpile, where friends can go to a movie, college students can walk and ride around their campus without fear. That's what we want, that's what we're fighting for, and we can do this. Tell your neighbor we can do this.
Can we do this, coalition? Yes! Now time to continue our work. Without further ado, we are going to proceed to the Gardner Auditorium and fill that auditorium to continue to make our voices heard. Some of you in your packets that you picked up have registered for meetings with your representatives and senators after the hearing or during the hearing. It will be a long hearing, but we want to make sure that we are there in full force for the 12 o'clock start. Don't dally, get there, let's fill that place and make our voices heard. What can we do? We can do this. Thank you to our senators and representatives. Thank you again to Speaker DeLeo. Thank you to Representative Linsky. Thank you to all of the coalition members who have been a part of the planning of this. And thank you so much to all of you. We can do this. Let's go.